Unscripted, unrehearsed, welcome to Talking Element. Hey, welcome to a very special episode of Talking Element. Today, Aaron and I are actually in Colorado Springs, and we are joined by Jonathan and Jennifer Whitaker. Hello.
Hi.
Howdy.
We came just to record this episode with you guys.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's not
totally.
true.
Our
That's
limitless budgets.
Our limitless budget. So there might be several people at Element who are watching this who may not know who you are. Can you just give a brief overview of who you are and how you're connected with Element?
I am Jennifer Whitaker, and my husband Jonathan and I lead the church plant of Element Colorado Springs here in Colorado Springs.
I'm Jonathan Whitaker. I was formerly an elder at Element in Santa Maria.
Formally, but you still are, so it's not really formally.
That's true. I was the youngest elder, right? And still
Because you keep saying that. Yes.
And how did you end up in Colorado Springs?
We're a military family, so stationed here at Peterson Air Force Base, now a Space Force base.
We live here with our three daughters. We have Lauren, who's 13, almost 14, Olivia, who turned 7 today, and Holly, who is 11.
I'm very excited because as Aaron just gave the message, I think we all thought of how applicable it is to your current situation. So we're going to dive into that in just a little bit. But speaking of the message, would you mind giving just a brief overview?
So today we look at how Paul essentially ends his time in the city of Rome. You know, Paul has spent a long time getting there, and really at the end of the book of Acts, you only get a few verses of what Paul does in Rome, because really it's more the sense of how we then live out what God is calling us to in our lives. And this is what the book of Acts kind of pushes us towards, how we live out what God has called us to in the midst of where we are, in all the situations we are, in the cities that we are, in the places that we are, to continue that mission and ministry that God sends us to.
Main topic. So wherever you are, we are God sent people right here, right now. So we're going to kind of unpack that a little bit more. So we really looked at how Paul's life and the way he conducted himself provoked questions, provoked people asking what's going on. And so I wanted to start with the question you had in the middle. When was the last time someone asked you what was different or why there was a difference in your life and how you lived? Or has anybody? And what happened and how did you respond?
So I had one, it's sort of in this vein. I was recently deployed, and when everybody's deployed, everybody has to introduce themselves. Nobody knows where anybody comes from, and so you kind of have to learn things about people, your coworkers, very quickly. When I was in the quarantine camp, you thought your quarantine was bad. Try doing it in 120-degree weather in a tent with a cordon around you that you can't wander outside of. So we tried to do as much real life as we could. And one of the things that we did was, since a lot of our junior officers didn't get to have their promotion ceremonies because of COVID, because of the lockdowns and so forth, we did a big promotion ceremony. And I mentioned kind of sheepishly, hey, should we have an invocation? Oh, yeah. But we don't have a chaplain. Well, I could do it, which led to people pulling out questions. Now, it wasn't necessarily how I was living my life. I did have to speak up and say, hey, this is something that I think is important. I think other people would think is important. But that led to the next question. Oh, well, why is that important to you? Well, I'm a Christian, I'm a minister. And then people really latched onto that. They wanted to know about that. And then the next Sunday, I found myself in the same little cordon of 250 feet in either direction, preaching the Sunday service, because I was willing to say, maybe we should pray at the promotion ceremony. And I'm really glad I did.
I think that's really important because I think as I talk to a lot of people at Element, they have jobs, whether they're school teachers, where they can't openly evangelize, but and I'm sure the military's the same way. And so I appreciate that you find ways to interject and to find ways to lead the conversation as well.
Absolutely. And I would encourage everybody, especially people in the military, to learn what the rules actually are. Because I was of the sort of naive assumption that, well, this is a workplace, we're not allowed to evangelize, we're not allowed to talk about our faith. And that's absolutely not the case. In fact, people in governmental positions especially have very strong protections about how they can demonstrate their faith, talk about their faith, because we are a constitutional republic, and these things are protected.
Jennifer, going back to the question of, do you have a story of when someone has been provoked to ask because of the way you've lived or something you've said?
Yeah, I kind of find that when you are a little bit different, we homeschool our kids. And so whenever I bring that up, I think of like my hairdresser, um, very clearly not a believer. But when I bring up with him that I'm a homeschool person, oh, well, why do you do that? Well, then I have a choice. I can say, well, the public schools aren't good enough for my kids, or I can say the real reason, which is that God called me to do this as a ministry to my children for me, because he specifically, God spoke to me and said, this is what I want for you. Um, yeah, I feel like it's disobedience if I skirt that question. So then I have to say, well, that's, it's part of the reason is my faith. And so then that opens the door to talk about our faith, and that we have a church that meets in our home, which is also very weird. And so I don't know. It's just that then opens the door to offer to pray with people. And I find that's very disarming
Yeah.
if there's a situation that's arisen and a person is frantic or worried or whatever, to not just say, hey, I'll pray for you, but to actually stop and pray with them in that moment. I feel that is a very powerful tool that we have.
We were on vacation with some friends about a year and a half ago, or a year ago or something, and after we left vacation, uh, this one lady, she goes, you are really nice to people. I didn't realize I was nice to people. I mean, you don't really know me, but she goes, you talk to everybody, but you talk like you're interested in people. And I go, but I do. I care about, what, like, we're in Tahoe and we're sitting down having lunch. There's these people sitting. I'm all, what do you do and where are you from and blah, blah, blah. And I was interested in their life and just listened to them. She goes, you're really good at that. And I didn't know I was really good at that. I just apparently do that because I like talking to people. I think all those interactions are just important because people are watching your life, whether they know you, like you're on vacation with them and never seen this in you, or they don't know you and they're just come along. And yeah, I think that's just that lifestyle of living in a way that loves others, loves Jesus in the midst of it, and realizing I think your life is
Thank
always on
God people
display.
can't read minds.
Yeah, yeah. And your life is always on display, and sometimes we forget that. We forget that I am here to be an ambassador for another kingdom that is invading this world, and I should live in a certain way that represents him, no matter where I am. Don't always do that, especially when I'm driving. Driving's the worst.
Oh yeah, and then you're acutely aware that you're not living for this world.
Yes.
Well, but I think that is also an important distinction. Is this is not saying live perfectly.
Right.
This is saying when you are a knucklehead, when you mess up, how do you even respond in those moments? And can we be a people who are honest enough to say, wow, man, I did that wrong. I was emailing or texting with a buddy of mine actually before we got in a plane to come out here, and he lives in Texas, and he's going to this church he's unhappy with, and he goes, I miss being around, and he mentioned both of us, but because you guys are honest. We can have conversations where I know you're not perfect. I know you can be a jerk or whatnot. That was about that guy. No, I'm just kidding. No, but he said, I appreciate the space to be honest, where he would come and ask his questions about life and the meaning of life, and he wasn't shunned. He's embraced, he's loved, and because
Even before he was a believer.
way before he was a believer, and that was way part of the journey for him, because I think he didn't have that space, and now as a believer, I don't think he has that space still, and I think that is important to live all life where it's not just I'm not making a convert. I'm just trying to love somebody who I love, and God's going to do the work.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think it's important too when we do live like a knucklehead in front of people and it gets pointed out to us and we see it, we go back and we apologize, because I've done that. And someone's like, why would you even come back and apologize to me? Well, because God has called me to live differently and I didn't live that way in front of you. I'm really sorry. I don't want to make amends if I can.
Yeah. God's purposes aren't going to be thwarted. You gotta own when you mess up. I think people's for lack of a better term, BS detector is a lot more keen than you think it is. My buddy Troy reminds me all the time. He's like, thank you for just living honestly in front of me. And well, what he means is, hey, sometimes you're a little rough around the edges, but I appreciate that because number one, I fess up when I'm wrong, but at the same time, he doesn't feel like he has to act in some perfect way or be outside the community. Now, I'm always seeking to be more like Christ. I always want to be more like Christ, and I really want Troy to know that. I say, hey, we both want to be more like Christ, but until I am like that, I'm not going to act, because you can only act for so long.
Right.
Be yourself. Let Jesus do what he does and change your life, because it's he who is going to complete the good work in you.
So one of the other themes that went along with all this was with all boldness and without hindrance. And how do we do that? How do we step into boldness and remove some of the hindrance, do you think?
I think sometimes people just think boldness is something different than it is. Like some people think boldness is, bull in a china closet. I'm going to go in and I'm just going to stand on my desk in the middle of work. Boldness is when God calls us into something, we go and do it, even when it's difficult. And boldness can be something as simple as taking somebody groceries. It could be something as simple as apologizing when you do something stupid. Boldness doesn't mean uh, going and yelling at somebody or doing something that's totally crazy. Boldness is trusting God enough to step into what he called you to do.
That goes back to First Peter, that you are ready and willing to make a defense, give a reason for the hope that is in you,
Yeah, and be bold enough to give that reason.
and be bold enough to actually do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when people ask about your life, you're responding.
Yeah, and when I think about boldness, the way you're talking about it, it's not going with gusto. It's usually I've got those butterflies, and
Oh, yeah.
I better overcome this for God.
So the last point I wanted to talk about was this being live sent on mission. And the three kind of sub points were sent in your volunteering, sent in your generosity, and sent in your faith. And I was hoping if any of you had any thoughts on for just a normal person being sent, how do they kind of jump into that? How do they begin living sent?
I think you step in really to where you are, because everyone is somewhere. And I think you step into where you are with your generosity and your lifestyle. And it's simply living the life that God has already placed in your hands. It's not always looking for the next big thing over the next hill. It's where am I right now? Who has God placed in my life right now? How can I speak about the things he's asked me to speak about, or just love people the way he's called me to love, just where I am?
First off, it comes to realizing that everybody is called. It is a general call for us all to be ministers, not just professionals, not people who have been to seminary, but all of us. As God equips us, and with our talents, our gifts, our finances, all of those things. And then just choose a portion of what God has given you and trust him with it. I was talking to you guys earlier about Will Flathers. Will Flathers is a guy that most of you guys don't know. He went to Element 10 years ago now, but he's the reason we have GCs, right? This is a young man, a single man who rented a house large enough that he could host Bible studies in. He stretched his finances a little bit and said, I'm going to give this portion of my life up to God and trust him with it. And look what God did with it. Look what God did with it a decade later. I credit him with how we kind of approached this house. We said, God, show us a house that we can continue doing the ministry that we feel called to, which is gathering people together, training lay leaders, and showing them a simple way to do church so they can recreate it for such a time as, I don't know, COVID, but we said this is a little portion of our life that we're gonna trust God with, and he has done so much more with it.
That's all I had. Was there anything that you guys were hoping to talk about?
I don't know. What were other things? You had some really good points in your sermon. I mean, good job.
How'd you say that? There you go. Just
Remember the part about your sermon?
Yeah, it was really
When you were
good.
talking about Paul?
You remember that?
That
Remember
was
he said
That was
that?
good. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, even in the last points, invest in your city, make a family, serve the common good. I mean, we could spend an hour talking about all that, but
that's where GCs come in.
that's where GCs come in. So we're gonna leave it there. We're gonna hope that you find some people to continue those conversations, to encourage one another to step out and live sently in your volunteering, in your generosity, and in your faith. And even though tonight we're sitting down with two of Element's elders, this really is for all of us. Every one of us at Element, we are called to and are sent to live where we are, how we are. And if you need help, please reach out to somebody. Please reach out to us. We would love to kind of help sit down and talk about that more with you and explore. It is something that is, even if for me, I feel like there's seasons where I've done that better than others. And right now, especially with COVID, I feel like I'm not doing it well. And so my prayer, I think our prayer, is all of us kind of re-engage and see ourselves as being sent to live for the glory of God. And through that will come good for us and others. And so we'll leave you there, and we will see you next week for episode 10 of Talking Element. Good day.
And what did Olivia ask for her birthday dinner?
Steak and potatoes.
Oh, how awesome.
That's right.
So we will be enjoying
Well trained.
well trained.
Well-trained children.